talking about for today's review. We're going to be talking about Thundercats #1. It's a new Dynamite comic. I'm very excited because I feel like I'm pretty big fan of Thundercats as a concept. Like I don't remember a lot of the mythology, especially going into this. Like I don't remember a lot of
Mhm.
the mythology. We'll probably stay away from a lot of spoilers, but let's talk about first the creative team here. We have Declan Shalvey is doing the writing, and then Drew Moss is working on the art. So we'll get to look at that in a second. So before we get into that, let me read you a little bit of what's going on here to get you caught up. Fleeing through space to escape their dying homeworld, the Thundercats were attacked en route by their mortal enemies, the mutants of Plundar. After diverting their damaged flagship to a planet called Third Earth, the surviving Thundercats now strive to rebuild their society in harmony with the new world's natives, but the mutants determined to possess the Thundercats' mystical gem, the Eye of Thundera, have tracked them down, and they've also forged an alliance with Mumra, the devil priest of Third Earth. Now the Thundercats, led by an inexperienced Lionel, must band together as never before to protect their legacy from this combined enemy. But they will be able to. But will they be able to withstand the onslaught of Mumra, the ever living, once he sets eyes upon them? So let me bring back Josh.
Sorry.
So we've covered what the Thundercats is kind of going to be about, but have you? What? Well, I guess Jeff, I'll go to you first. Without going into deep any spoilers, which I don't know that how much you can spoil this book, but what did you think of this book?
I thought it was okay. Yeah, if you're familiar with the Thundercats in any form or fashion, there's not much to spoil in this book. It pretty much gives it's like it's a origin story book, but I remember the first two. I vaguely remember watching the first two episodes of the 1980s cartoon. It basically covers what happened in the first two episodes of that cartoon in this
Okay.
book. And I think the reboot from like what is it, 2011, kind of the first episode of that is kind of the first issue of this book. So if you're familiar with the Thundercats in any form or fashion, there's no surprises for you here. It's a very straightforward kind of retelling.
Well, there is one surprise though, right? There's a big twist at the end, I thought, unless there's something I'm not remembering about the original series.
I think Josh may be right, and maybe we'll need to go back and look. I think obviously I don't think
It's on Hulu.
I think obviously the purpose of the purpose of the series is obviously is not just to like redo the adaptation of the series. I think the creators want to tell their own story, but from what I've seen online, they're pretty big fans. So I really thought, and let me pull up some of the preview art. I really thought it was very efficient when it came to the storytelling. Like we know that if you're buying this book, you're probably at least you probably know the Thundercats a little bit. But it's very clear, like it's very straightforward with the like these are the first 3 pages, or I guess the first page and the big splash. So introducing everyone. I think they also give you very clear characterizations of each of these characters, like especially Panthro, like you kind of learn everything you need to know about him within a conversation with Lionel in this issue. I was telling Josh before we started recording, I didn't remember that Lionel was supposed to be the same age as the other kids, and then his capsule didn't hold up, so he aged. So they kind of go over that in here in the preview pages. So I didn't remember that, so that came as quite a shock just to see like it really puts everything in a different context. So that was a lot of fun. But Josh, what did you think of the book overall?
Yeah, I had kind of the same experience as Jeff. Honestly, I was reading it, going, okay, this feels very much like it's rehashing the original episode, right? I agree with you, Danny. I think it does so very effectively, right? That first page is beautiful, and just in the fact that it is setting up everything you need to know without showing you a single character, right?
Yeah.
Even Jaga is kind of in silhouette, and then so the first time you see them is that kind of splash panel there, where they all get named. So yeah, I felt the same way. There is a big twist right at the end, and that was the first moment where I felt like, oh, they really are going to take this in a different direction, right? Mm-hmm. But I this is an unfair comparison, but I just keep thinking about the Energon universe stuff and how they're also taking the basic structure of the original Transformers and G.I. Joe shows and kind of in the case of Daniel Warren Johnson's Transformers, like retelling it in a way that is very compelling and very contemporary. And then I think in the case of like Duke and presumably the upcoming G.I. Joe series, kind of taking the basic idea from the original show and kind of modernizing it. I didn't realize until I reread that facsimile of the first issue of the original G.I. Joe comic that the scientist that Duke meets in the first issue of Duke is from that issue.
Yeah.
Like, that's the same scientist. Like, holy crap, I totally forgot this. But anyway, I'm way off track. I just, until that twist at the end of the first issue, I felt like this was not doing as good of a job as those Energon comics were of taking the basic story and updating it. Just felt like a rehash. So I had very much the same response you had, Jeff.
I will because you were like, except for the end, and I was like, what did I forget at the end? So I just kind of ran back and flipped through it again to kind of look at the end. I was like, I had kind of forgotten about the twist ending. And thinking about what you just said, I was like, I would have moved that to the middle of the book, because I think the first 90% of the book is just, if you aren't familiar with the Thundercats, perfect, like it's great. But if you are, which I think this is going to cater to the people who are, like the first,
and I think that's why I got a little bit more out of the first part of the book, because I haven't watched the original stuff in, I don't know, probably 25 years or so.
Yeah.
I never ended up watching the 2011 cartoon or even the later one. So like, I just really like one other thing that I really enjoyed was just kind of how conservative I feel Declan Shalvey's being with like giving you Mumra and like they're like he's here, we'll get to it, and then at the end there's a panel at the end where like really leaves a huge question, right? Where where I think that's kind of a lot of the story's gonna either hinge or spin off of. So I feel like this issue was like, we're gonna bring you into the world that but then we're gonna go in a bit of a different direction. Maybe a longer issue would have served that purpose to kind of expand a little bit more on that idea. All right, before we move on,
you guys feel like this issue is written for the collection? Like I kind of feel like if you're reading the trade of this, right, you're going to be invested in getting through the first issue because you want to read the others that are in that collection, and then
you get to that last page and you want to turn. So I agree with that. I do like that the art fits the like what I pictured Thundercats in my head, but it's not just recreating the Thundercats.
Although I am a little disturbed by Tigra's like chops,
facial hair.
Yeah,
what is that?
It was like the first thing that hit me when I turned the first page was like, whoa, okay, man.
Yeah, that was my reaction. I'm like, am I being old? Like, let's give it a shot. Let's give it through the book, and then, but the whole time I'm just like, it just looks weird. It looks weird.
It feels kind of Dum Dum Duganish to me, it really calls a lot of attention to it. But I think it's really fun. We didn't get a lot of the kids. I keep calling them the kids because it's easier than remembering them. Is it Wild Kitty and Wildcat? That, right? I do hope we expand a little bit more on their relationship with Lionel now that they've reminded me of this, like, oh, by the way, these guys are all the same age, so like it's almost like you lost a friend,
right? Yeah.
Right? So, but yeah, overall, I'm still pretty intrigued. There's a big action scene. Of course, you get the cool, like, Thundercats, and adapting that to a static medium. I think it's a difficult challenge, but I think this book kind of clear that. I think Drew Moss really made it feel as big as it should be, and then
Yeah.
the lettering also like really added like that big sound in your head of like, oh, I remember what this is supposed to sound like.
Yeah. Yeah. He did a good job of basically taking the various poses during that sequence and just using those as the static panels.
Yeah,
So your brain fills in the action. You're like, yeah, you know. So
the big swing. So yeah, so cool. And of course, we'll keep talking about this probably. We're very grateful to Dynamite to let us preview this. So now that you've heard everything that we think about this issue of Thundercats, I also wanted to talk about. So I went back and I watched the first two episodes of the original 1980s Thundercats cartoon because I wanted to get a comparison of some of the tone, the character designs, the looks, the feel of the story, and also kind of like a little bit of the plot. Right, I think this first issue of Thundercats gives us what would be the origin, kind of combining the first elements of the first two episodes of the cartoon, but obviously everything is taken in its own direction. So I will say the tone of the comic is definitely a lot more serious, a little bit more grown up. I'm not gonna say elevated because I think the cartoon, like, it knew what it was and knew what it wanted to do, but it's definitely a lot more comedic. I think and spoilers ahead for the comic, the exclusion of Snarf is something we didn't really want to talk about in the main review. But if you're watching this deep, you probably have already read the comic. So really interesting that that character was omitted. I don't know if he'll show up later. Maybe it was an element that the creators felt that it was a little bit too much. It would take away from the tone that they were going for. And then of course we don't really know what to expect from what's going on. Right in the first episode, uh, we get to live a little bit longer in the ship, whereas in the comic book, that part is really just brought down to that one page. So we don't really get to see the relationship between Lionel and Jaga, and then Panthro, and how everyone else kind of treated Lionel when he was a kid, and now that he's kind of an adult. So that's very interesting. It was very interesting to go back and watch the original cartoon. Now, I don't think I'll continue to watch it because I want to experience the comic as its own thing. But one thing we are planning to do is to do a first watch of I believe it's 2011 Thundercats, maybe 2016. I think it's 2011. Cartoon Network put out another Thundercats that was very short lived, but it had an updated animation style. So I will say one of the things that I enjoyed the most in the comic and in the cartoon is when Lionel unleashes his sword. Uh, the motion of it, like, that was captured perfectly, and I think we talked about it in the main part of the video. But Lionel's emotion is captured very well by Drew Moss, so that was one of the things that I really appreciated. So yeah, we'll definitely keep talking more about Thundercats, and stay tuned because we'll be discussing it both in separate videos and on the live. Also, remember, if you're a member of this channel, you get a lot of these videos ahead of time, so make sure to keep track of that. So hello everyone, Dan here from the Next Issue Podcast. On today's video, I'll be doing a review for the new comic from DSTLRY, Gone issue number 2. This is the ongoing, I guess it's a miniseries from DSTLRY, but let me give you a quick synopsis and then I'll get into the book. Hello everyone, Dan here from the Next Issue Podcast. On today's video, I'll be doing a review for Gone number 2 from DSTLRY. Let's take a look at the creative team before we get into the book. This book is written and with art by Jacques, also colors by Lee Lorish and Jacques, and letters by Ann World Design. Will Dennis is the editor, and book design by Emma Price. So, if you haven't been reading this book, I think you've been missing out. Luckily for everyone, Distillery titles are now, for the most part, available digitally and physically, so make sure to go check those out. In this book, the new hit series from Distillery by Jacques continues. It's been 15 years since we last saw Abby. A frightened 13-year-old stowaway on a spaceship bound for distant stars, now nearly 30, Abby is not only still roaming the galaxy but a self-assured and deeply scarred veteran of an intergalactic war. Beautifully written and drawn by Jacques Eisner Award-winning artist of Snow Angels and Batman: One Dark Knight, Gone is an action-packed sci-fi adventure where a young heroine has grown into a war-weary spacefarer who still dreams of an elusive goal: getting home. For fans of Endor and the Hunger Games, I think that's actually I never really thought about that. I think it's definitely very apt that this really grasps from a lot of tropes, and I think that's one of the things that I really enjoyed. Right, um, Jacques is very familiar with a lot of these tropes. He's worked on a lot of comic books over the years, and it's just really kind of combining everything into like a mixture of what he feels are the greatest hits of that, which leads to a very compelling story. It's a really simple narrative at points, but it's also I like that Jacques doesn't really it doesn't get bogged down in over explaining everything. I think he realizes that readers are witty and smart enough to kind of like figure out all the tropes and all the little trappings and tribulations from the story. All that combined with fantastic oversized art. I think one of the best things is about the size of these books is that Jacques and these artists are really taking advantage of like these wider pages, really making feel everything very cinematic. That's very, very cool. I think Jacques has a real good ability of demonstrating depth, demonstrating movement, demonstrating in the atmosphere of like how dark and dank and gritty. Because these rebels are these these people that are here, including Abby, live in like the underbelly of this ship, right? Which is also I love imagining how massive this ship must be for it to be compartmentalized in a way that you you can have people really stow away and hide. It's really exciting. So let's take a look at some of the preview art here. As you can see, we see a really cool shot of Abby at the top of these platforms, and like this is what I was mentioning about the depth and just Jacques' art just really lends itself to this kind of look. Great letters too, just really giving you those cool sound effects and putting into perspective how far these people really are away from Abby. And then boom, taking a plunge. I love that. I really just love the pacing and the motion, like having Abby multiple times. Also, the character design I think looks pretty rad. Just I can see this being cosplayed at conventions because it's something that can be done. I think fairly easily. And yeah, just the expertise now after all this time that has passed, and Abby still just wants to get home. Now, one thing I do want to talk about as well is, and of course, I don't know the coloring breakdown, but in this last page of our preview art, I just wanted to highlight how the difference in the coloring of this book. Like whenever something needs to really pop out on the page, I think Jacques really goes there, and that really contrasts with the style. As you can see, the panel up top, very blue, dark in tone, cold, gritty, and then we get to this like these sensors are tripped, and the bombs activate, and just zooming in on the eyes, and then on the next panel, just showing you now that the explosions are happening, the eyes are closed, like just all these little details. And this is in part, like I said, because Jacques is working with an oversized page. These books are magazine size, so you get to really take advantage of that art. So yeah, I think in this issue a lot of things escalate. There's some big revelations, and I think there's only one more issue. These are definitely oversized, so you really get a lot of story, you really get a lot of art, you really just get so much out of these books. There's a million amazing covers that I wish I could get them all, because they have really great creators working on all this stuff. So yeah, I'm just ecstatic about this book. There's a couple of distillery books that are ongoing right now, Gone and Somna, so and both of those have been amazing, so I'll definitely be checking out whatever is in the future for this book. So Hello, everyone. Daniel here from the Next Issue Podcast. On today's video, I'll be doing a review for Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, Their Return #1. This is a new book from BOOMStudios. Let's take a look at the creative team before we get into this book. This book is written by Amy Jo Johnson, who portrayed the Pink Ranger Kimberly, and Matt Hodson, illustrated by Nico Leon, colors by Francesco Segala, with assistance by Gloria Martinelli, and letters by Ed Dukeshire. So, what is going on? What is exactly this series? Let's talk about this. As I mentioned, this is written by actress, screenwriter, and director Amy J. Johnson, the original Pink Ranger herself, along with rising co-writer Matt Hodson, and renowned artist Nico Leon, who's done such projects as Spider-Man and worked in Wonder Woman. Now fans can experience something unlike anything they've ever seen in the Power Rangers universe, in the TV or in the comics. This takes place in an alternate universe where the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers finally defeated Rita Repulsa and Lord Zed, but at a terrible cost. And in the wake of tragedy, the team went their separate ways. 22 years later, the long disbanded team reunites to mourn the loss of their beloved friends, but Zack and Billy have some unexpected information to share. Jason, the Red Ranger, has been operating as a lone vigilante and has since disappeared. Will the remaining Rangers be able to track him down, especially with a mysterious figure now in pursuit? Um, Boy, let me tell you, I have been waiting for this. We got to see a little story written by Amy Jo Johnson and Matt Hodson in the Mighty Morphin, I think the 40-year anniversary one shot, which was a lot of fun. But this comic was so interesting, especially as a fan of the Rangers that hasn't really been keeping up with everything. The only thing you need to know is like the main premise of like the TV show. That's all you need to know, because everything else this comic brings you into it. Of course, there may be a few things that are, they make mentions of the grid and the coins, but I think all that mythology was overall, it's covered pretty well overall in the cartoon or in the TV show, but it's also covered pretty well here. You get enough information to figure out what's going on. So we have a big mystery that's teased at the beginning of the issue, and that's the pages that we'll see some preview art from. We have a lot of big emotional beats right from the beginning, right? The Rangers' relationship, it's fractured. We don't really know what happened to them ultimately. Kimberly goes by a new name as well, which is going to be interesting to explore. We'll get to figure out what happened to some of these Rangers. Why did they agree to not be Power Rangers anymore? And of course, we have an unexpected visitor. So, like, all those things just really add up to a really, really fun comic to kick off this series. So, let's take a look at some of the preview art. As I mentioned, the this is just kind of a memories, and I really love the use of the black and white here. It almost makes me want a black and white Power Ranger series that, the only colors you see are maybe the Rangers color, like the Rangers are the only thing that are color. I think that's a really fun distinction. Um, but yeah, Nickel Leon is just fantastic at drawing these really cool stylized updates on the Rangers too, right? As you can see here, Jason's outfit or the Red Ranger's outfit looks very similar to what we're used to, but of course has a new few different touches. I love the cape, carrying the big sword. He's got the holsters and all that stuff. So definitely a lot more vigilante, a lot more tactical. Um, so great updates to the mythology. I think, of course, Amy Jo Johnson being a person that played one of the characters and then also interacted with a lot of the other people and was part of the show. It's very easy. Like, she very much captures the voices of these characters. And Matt Hodson, I can imagine that he's probably a big fan of the Rangers. So very excited to hear what people have to say about this, and also to see what the future of the series is going to bring, because it definitely left a lot of questions unanswered, but it gave me so much that I'm so interested in at the moment. Of course, Boom Studios is putting out some really cool covers for this issue, so make sure to check that out. You'll see some of them at the end of the video, but If you have read this issue, let me know what you thought about it down in the comments. Hello everyone, Daniel here from the Next Issue Podcast. On today's video, I'll be doing a review for Beneath the Trees Where Nobody Sees number 3. This is a new book from idwcomics. Let's take a look at the creative team behind this before we get into the book. So this book is written and illustrated by Patrick Horvath with letters by Hassan Otsmale Elhal. And I really, once again, if you're a little behind or you forgot everything that kind of happened in the last issue, I love that you get to read the Woodbrook Wanderer, to kind of refresh your memory of what happened in the last issue. Now, in this issue, the synopsis is actually written as a poem, I guess, so I'm going to read that. As Woodbrook quakes in terror, the killer runs free. The town now plans a funeral instead of festivity. Sam has her suspicions. She'll follow her hunch. She better act fast, or more bones might go crunch. But Sam isn't afraid. She knows she'll solve the case, because the killer doesn't know, but they left a trace. That last bit of it is very exciting, because I like that our main protagonist, Samantha, is obviously, she is a killer. That's not the part I like. I just like that she's very capable, very observant, very wise. And this book just really finds very interesting ways to portray how on edge the town is. We'll see some of that in the preview art. Once again, the juxtaposition of these like very cute, painterly, like almost like a coloring book feel, vibes to it, with the subject matter of like there's a killer running around. On top of our main character, there's also a killer, but nobody knows that. Really interesting stuff. There's also a lot of like imagery of cutting flesh and red backgrounds, which I think really adds to that tension. The dialogue between the inhabitants of the town, all that stuff really builds up. Of course, Samantha is kind of suspicious of a new character in this issue, and she keeps following those little clues. And towards the end, we do have maybe the actual killer reveal themselves, but do they even know that Samantha is onto them? That'll be really interesting to see how it plays out in the next issue. Let's take a look at some of the preview art here. As I mentioned, very just the shorthand for like raising the tension, raising the stakes. You see the inhabitants of the town locking their door, which is probably not something that they used to do before. This town is obviously very quiet, very much peaceful, and then we get to follow. We get to follow one of the citizens, kind of running around, running errands. They go to the butcher shop, and I like the way we see that many of the people of this town are trying to probably just get back to kind of like more normalcy, right? So they go to the butcher shop. They thank they thank the butcher for being open, but there's something amiss. There's something afoot. We hear this loud sneeze, and Samantha also hears that, and that's kind of a clue. So it's almost a very interesting mix of like this art may feel like just everyday kind of mundane situations, but every few panels there's something that raises the stakes, raises the tension, whether it's a bit of dialogue, whether it's us seeing Samantha looking on to finding a clue, whatever the case may be. So yeah, Patrick Horvath is doing a fantastic job. The lettering really shines in this issue, especially when you have all those sound effects for the butcher, and the juxtaposition between the text and the like kind of gory imagery behind it, because it is a butcher shop. So yeah, it's really interesting. I really have been enjoying this series, probably the most fun mystery out in comics at the moment. So if you have read this series, let me know what you thought about it down in the comments. As always, thank you for watching, everyone. Make sure to come back and check out the rest of our videos. We'll have more comic reviews, trailer reactions, TV recaps, all that fun stuff here in the channel. Thanks for watching, everyone. Bye-bye.